Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. First off, I apologize if there is wind, lawnmower, birds chirping in the background, but with this weather here in Ohio, I just had to take it in and figured I'd come out here and sit with you guys and talk through a new hobby that I have actually taken on. Now, I'm sure you can see from the title of this video, yes, my hobby that I have taken on over the past 3 to 4 weeks has been sourdough. I have created my own sourdough starter, and since then actually am working on baking my third piece of bread. Now, I had heard of having a sourdough starter and that you kind of have to take care of it, and it's this mother and you can't let it die. And honestly, I had been intimidated for years and thought, what kind of special products do I need to buy? It's going to be so much work. I don't want to do it. And then finally, again, with everything going on and being in isolation, I did look into what it takes, and then I was surprised that all it took is water and flour. Yeah, so if you're sitting at home debating, all you need is water and flour to start your own sourdough starter. Now, I am not the most patient person, so the fact that I had to wait like 10 days to be able to use my starter for my first loaf was pretty tough. Also, the temperature in our house is a little bit lower than where the starter ideally likes to be, and so it took a little bit to get my starter going. Today is May 6th as I'm recording this. I started my first starter on April 21st, and it's not until here in the last couple of days I've really seen action take place. I've definitely smelt the sourdough smell, but the actual bubbles in the starter hasn't happened until now. Now, the purpose of today's video is really to walk you through what it is like for a first-time sourdough bread baker when they make their first loaf. Now, as I said, my starter was not as ripe as I wanted it to be. The smell was there, but the actual bubbles and the yeast building portion of it was not where I wanted it to be. So for my first 2 loaves that I did make, I did add a 1/4 teaspoon of active yeast into the recipe just to ensure that it wasn't going to be a flat bread because I was terrified. And then the one I am making today, I actually did with no yeast, so I'm really excited to see how that's going to turn out. Now, being brand new to sourdough bread baking, I didn't realize how much of an art form this really is. Baking a bread, it's not just a simple recipe of where you're putting together the dough, you let it sit for 2 hours, and then you bake it. This is a full-on 48-hour process. Yes, it takes time, but I also think the results have been really fun, and it's neat to see the different transitions of the dough as you work through it, and then of course that final outcome when it comes out of the oven. Now, I first brought my starter to life, as I said, on April 21st, and then I fed it every single day, sometimes twice a day. And then I did decide on April 29th to actually start my first loaf. Now, I will say I made sure the night before on the 28th to actually feed my starter in the evening, because to me it has taken about that 12 hours for my starter to reach its peak. Now, the next morning when I wake up, I do go ahead and mix my flour and my water that I need for the actual dough. This is a process called autolyse, where you essentially hydrate the flour a little bit before you're adding the starter and the salt, just to ensure that everything incorporates really well and that the flour is active. Now, once the autolyse has completed, you then add your starter. And it is important that it is in that ripe stage to really ensure that you are getting the active yeast enzymes in it and that you're getting the right flavor profile that you want. You'd be amazed by how much you can taste that sourdough flavor in the end product. And then you let that sit for 30 minutes. Then you go ahead and you add your salt, which all of this is all percent based as well when you're adding the stuff, because this is a very wet dough. You want to make sure you have the right salt ratios as well. So I did also link the recipe below that I used, and it's honestly so far the only one that I have used because I know how to manage it, and I love the time frame timeline that is included in the actual recipe. Now, once you add your salt, you let that sit for 15 minutes, and yes, we are not done. We have only started. Now, for the next few hours, you are going to be stretching and folding your dough. So for the first 3 folds out of 6 folds you do, you are doing it in 15-minute increments. So every 15 minutes, you fold it, rotate it, fold it, rotate it on all 4 sides, and then set it aside. 15 minutes later, you do it again. And so you do it in that 15-minute interval 3 times. Then, for the last 3 folds, 4, 5, and 6, you split it up with 30 minutes in between. Yes, it is a little bit time consuming. Really, the process of it is not, but just making sure that you are home to complete this, which what better time to start this and try it out than now. Now, the reason for all these folds is to build up the gluten and the strengths within the dough. It is really important that you have that as it rises to really get those nice big air pockets and to get that nice pull apart feeling when you have your loaf. And then for the next couple hours, you are going to let your dough rest so it can really grow that yeast inside, and it's going to get about double the size in that time frame. Once that is complete, you will then slowly roll out your dough or take it out of the bowl, trying to not ruin those air bubbles. And then you're going to use a bread knife or bread scraper. Sorry, these are brand new terms to me. This is the only product that I bought because it seemed like it was so useful. And you will just kind of shape the bread to make it more firm around the edges so that it can really start shaping that bread shape. You'll then let it sit for about 20-30 minutes uncovered, and then you're going to do your final shaping. Then you will flour up a bowl, put it in the bowl, and put it away overnight. This could be anywhere from between 12 hours to 16 hours, and in the fridge it is really doing a lot of work of settling into the piece of bread that it is going to be. Now the next morning I go down, I make my coffee. Yes, it's the first thing I need, and I turn on the oven to 500. Yes, that is extremely hot, but that is what you need in order for this bread to bake properly. Now at the time that you heat up your oven, make sure you put in your Dutch oven as well, because you want that to be nice and hot once your bread goes in it. And you are actually going to let that oven be fully heated for a full hour. Now once your oven has been heated for an hour, you will take out the Dutch oven. Make sure that you prep your bread by actually scoring it. There are people who like to make ears or shapes on it just to have a proper nice release and honestly create a really beautiful design on top of your loaf. You will then add it to your Dutch oven, place it with the lid on back in the oven for 20-25 minutes at that 500 degrees. That's going to ensure that there is steam that stays inside and gets you a really nice crispy crust on that loaf. Once that time frame has passed, you can go ahead and move your oven down to 475-450 degrees and then let it cook for another 15 to 25 minutes, really based off how brown you want it. And once complete, carefully take it out of the oven and then be patient. Let it sit for another hour or two. Make sure that it has fully cooled prior to cutting it to ensure that you're not breaking any of that texture that you've worked so hard to get. Now, I have found it super satisfying to make this. Will I continue to do it on a regular basis after isolation? I don't know, but you have ways of managing your starter in the fridge, so yes, I will definitely maintain and keep that because there are some really fun, unique things you can make, and it adds a great flavor profile. It's a bit time consuming, but it's super fun, and it's a great hobby that I am happy I took on. Having walked you through the process, if you do have any additional questions, please make sure to ask them below. If you're somebody new who's unsure of trying it, I can tell you, I'm only a couple weeks into this experience, so yes, I may not have as much knowledge as others, but this is really something where you have to adapt and see what happens, and I would be happy to help out as much as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed the walkthrough of this sourdough bread making. It's a really fun process. There is so much satisfaction in when you first cut through that loaf and what it looks like inside, and just the pride of having made this beautiful piece of art. And honestly, putting some nice butter on it, it just tastes like heaven. You can also get creative with putting different seasonings on top. So on my second loaf, I actually did add bagel seasoning. I will say my onions burnt a little bit, so it does limit what you can use it for, but it was really fun to mix it up and try something different. Now, some tips for if you are new at this: remember, it takes time to get a good starter going. Don't just think that you can start your starters today and make a loaf tomorrow. If you are looking to bake a sourdough bread within the next 2 weeks, start your starter today. Like I said, all you need is water and flour. So just do your research on it. And that brings me to my second tip. Make sure you do as much research as you can. I will link some of my favorite videos below on how to get a good starter going, but the research I have done has been so significant, and when things don't go your way, there is always an answer on YouTube or on the internet. Tip number 3, give yourself grace. Don't expect to be perfect at it. It's a very wet dough, so it feels differently to work with. And like I said, my starter wasn't elevating the way that I had wanted it to, so yes, I did add some yeast to my actual bread for the first few times, and I don't know how this one is gonna go now. However, you will of course see the results. I'll actually put a picture in here, and I'm hoping it's gonna turn out awesome. And my 4th tip is just to have fun with it. This is really just something to keep you going. Maybe it's entertaining for the kids. It's just an extra hobby that you're taking on. And so I would encourage you to find beauty in the process and the fun of it and see where it takes you. Maybe you find out it's not for you and then the only thing you've wasted is a little bit of flour. Also, if you are new to my channel, I do post new videos on a weekly basis and would love to have you join the family. So please make sure you subscribe to this channel and I will see you guys next week. Now, if you have made it this far into the video, the day I made my first loaf was also the day that my grandma unfortunately passed. There has therefore been so much significant meaning behind this new process, hobby, and joy, and I will forever remember her and carry her with me with every loaf that I make for the rest of my life. She was so special to me and still is, and I want to dedicate this to her, and I hope she knows how loved she was and will never be forgotten.